I just got home from watching Den of Thieves, Pantera, also known as Den of Thieves 2, and I have thoughts. Of course, I almost always have thoughts about movies. That's the whole reason I do these things, but I digress. Okay, Den of Thieves. I'm sort of going to combine my thoughts about the first Den of Thieves with this one as well, because when I first saw Den of Thieves, I remember not feeling overly impressed with it, and I'm not sure exactly why. I don't know if maybe it was because it was just something I had on and I wasn't paying complete attention to it. I had forgotten some of the details when I rewatched it, but I did remember the scene that happened with him and his wife in front of the kids and all that. I knew that there were family issues going on with him. But the reason that I rewatched it recently was because, as I mentioned in my review for Better Man, I thought for sure that the Regal Mystery Movie Monday was going to be Den of Thieves 2, and it was not. So I bought my ticket to go see this one, and I'm glad I rewatched the first one because I feel like it helped me appreciate this one. I'm just going to get my thoughts about the second movie out to start with. I enjoyed this film. I thought it was a solid follow-up to the first movie. In this second movie, I feel like Gerard has kind of settled into the role a little bit more. In the first movie, there were so many times where I felt like he was just, okay, so obviously his character is brash and vulgar. He doesn't really play by the rules. He's an asshole. He's just like all of these things. And I felt like there were times where Gerard was just going over the top with it. Kind of like a Jim Carrey version of a bad, I mean, not that. The point I'm trying to make is I felt like he was overacting this a tad. It just came across that way, not in every single part of the film, but especially like the beginning and then other scenes here and there where he's interacting with the baddies at different times and his superiors or whatever, other people that he's working with. So the times where I felt like he came across as more authentic was when it was the moments with his wife and, losing his kids and stuff like that. In this second movie, it feels like his performance is more leveled out. And I thought he did great in here. I enjoyed the premise. One thing that felt different, obviously, was the location. The original movie is supposed to take place in Los Angeles. I did not realize until I was listening to the recent Rewatchables podcast episode that it was actually filmed in Atlanta. Could have fooled me. I would have never known. Anyway, this movie takes place mostly in France. The first movie, there's this spectacular, there's like this robbery at the beginning, and then there's this plan for this heist, and then there's this very well thought out spectacular heist that happens. And you think to yourself, how is the writer, because the director also wrote this, his name is Christian, can't remember his last name. Sorry, I'll put it up on the screen when I'm editing. You're thinking, can he top this? And can he top it in such a way that it doesn't feel like he overreached? Like he just went way overboard? Because you know how sometimes this is what happens with sequels. I don't feel like he did. I felt like he managed to nudge it up a little bit, the stakes and the things that were happening without it feeling like it went completely off the rails, if that makes any sense. So I liked that about it. I also liked that he did return for this movie. Obviously, the fact that he had his hands in both films, the tone of both films feels pretty similar. It feels like it's done by the same person. The editing was really good. I like the editing. It's long like the first movie. The first movie is more than 2 hours long. This one is as well. It's 2 hours and 20 something minutes. And the credits weren't that terribly long. So it was a pretty lengthy film. It picks up a few years after the events of the first one, at least 2. They don't really specify, but that some time has gone past. He has now, been fully divorced from his wife. He's not able to see his kids as much. Some of the really touching scenes in there were like when he was interacting with his kids, and they obviously love their dad and he loves them. He wasn't the most stable father. I also didn't like his ex-wife though. I did not like their mother because there's this scene where she's leaving him and she gets all mad because he drops some F-bombs in front of the kids. They're closed up in the car. They probably couldn't even hear him. But then in the next moment, she turns around and she starts physically assaulting him and screaming at him. Like, what the heck? Whatever. I did not like her. Even though maybe there's a part of me that could understand the issue she had with him, obviously, but okay, I'm getting sidetracked. There's no appearance of the wife or the kids because this takes place primarily across the pond on the other side. There's mention of them. You can tell he's kind of worn down even more than, it seemed like he was at the beginning. He was obviously had very unhealthy habits. He was like eating donuts at the crime scene that had been involved in the crime. I mean, he's just like so over the top, this guy. He wasn't quite as that over the top in this particular movie, but I did like how the director made it so that his actions in here made sense. They tracked for me. Despite some issues I have with this movie, minor issues pretty much, kind of like with the first, things like how did they manage to figure out in the first movie exactly where this bank robbery was going to be had, like the main bank robbery. So it was little things like that. Timing stuff. There's a group of people that come upon them towards the end, and the timing was just perfect. How did they know exactly where they were going? There was no way they could have known. And then there's another group of people that happen upon them at the exact right moment. That felt a bit like, oh, okay. Up until this point, I had been pretty satisfied with the fact that the way certain things were going didn't always feel like it was your typical, oh, this is going to happen and this is going to happen. I like that. I like that there were parts in this movie that subverted my expectations. But then there were times at the end where things happened and it felt a bit cliche. So that's a very minor complaint I have. There's another moment in here where it doesn't really ring true to me. There's some characters that get dunked in the water, and not temporarily either. They're in there for a while, but their cell phones still work later. I don't think they had enough time to leave them in rice that long. So anyway, just little things like that. But as a whole, this film was enjoyable, if you can call crime and heist movies enjoyable. I'm not necessarily a big fan of heist movies, but because I enjoyed the first one, I was open to this one. And I knew the premise. I was suspicious of the premise, but I knew the premise. I had heard them talking about it on the Rewatchables podcast. So I went into it sort of knowing a little bit about it, but open-minded because I enjoyed the first one so much on my rewatch of it recently. I like Gerard Butler as an actor. He doesn't seem like he's pulling in the greatest numbers as far as the box office goes, but for whatever reason, I just have always liked him. Speaking of pulling in numbers at the box office, I was looking up some financials for this, and for the first movie, the budget was $30 million. This came out in 2018, the first movie. Not terrible, not awful. It made back about more than 2.5 times what was spent. This includes what it made at the box office, which was about 80 million, and what it made later DVD Blu-ray sales, which was about 7 and something. So it made 87 something million. Because it wasn't this huge blockbustery thing, I was kind of surprised to find out that this second one was coming along, but I mean, I guess they were happy enough with it. The budget on this one, it's a little bit higher, but impressively not craptastically higher. You know how, like, what was it? I think it was Happy Death Day. The budget for the second movie doubled. The budget for the second Knives Out movie, like way. And the third one, like it's crazy. But the budget for this second movie, and it surprises me that it's as low as it is, was 40 million. That's the number I found right before I started recording this. So that's interesting that they were able to pull this off. Now, granted, Gerard Butler, he's not like an A-lister, I guess, but there was a lot of people in this movie. There were a lot of locations in this movie, and there was a lot of stuff going on, and this movie was not short. So it's interesting that this was done for as cheaply as it was. I mean, granted, 40 million is nothing to sneeze at, but you know what I mean. So some other getting back to some things I liked about this film, I've already mentioned the editing. Despite the fact that it was long, I thought the pacing was fine. I really wasn't bored, and I liked the chemistry between Gerard Butler's character and O'Shea Jackson. Is that his name? I think that's his name. his character, the same one from the first. He called him Fraulein in the first movie and in the second movie. I like the chemistry between them. It also felt like there was a touch more comedy in here, especially the bickering and banter between them at certain moments in the film. There were a few chuckles that it elicited from me and from some other people in the crowd. One thing I liked about this movie and the first one was how textured the sound was, like when he's eating a donut or drinking coffee. And now it wasn't nasty the way, but like he makes it sound so good, like so tasty with the coffee and the croissant and the donut. Not that I eat those things anymore, but whatever. That was something I always liked about the way his character was portrayed in the first one. He had that gritty cop sort of look, slurping on coffee and, donuts and everything, and smoking, all the smoking. Anyway, that sort of thing continues in this second movie, and I was happy with it. I hope it performs well. I hope that fans of the first one will like this. They might feel like it's feeling a bit bigger than the first one, and that's because it is. Because it's like worldwide stuff. It's various locations that these different events are happening, not just one city. So it's certainly, the scope has been broadened for the setting. And as far as the potential for a sequel, that is kind of left on the table a bit-ish. Have no idea if that's going to happen. I guess that will depend on how well this performs. And because the first one wasn't like this huge blockbustery thing, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing a third one, but I'm satisfied if it doesn't happen, because I feel like there are two solid entries here we've got in this movie series, and I'm happy with it. And it just kind of furthers my appreciation for the fact that 2025 is getting started off on a pretty decent footing. We'll see if that trend continues. Okay, I don't have anything else to say about Den of Thieves Pantera, aka Den of Thieves 2, so I'm going to wrap this up, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Later.